Okay, what I also did was to take some of those subjects. I took the sort of top 100 subjects of the English FE system, and I correlated them against. I linked them to standard occupational classifications and the earnings data for standard occupational classifications. So over here, up the top look, is our median wage, which is the middle point of the wage structure in the UK. In that year, in 2009, of 26,450. And then I took our sort of professions and in the FE colleges. I said how many starters were there. I said what the average wage was and what the median wage was. And you can see that accounting's not too bad, but when you get down to health and social care, which is a huge, remember how big that was in those charts, £13,000 as the median wage. When you the safe handling of medicines, there's a very high wage because it was the newest occupational code. I don't actually believe that the majority of people doing safe handling of medicines courses would be doing that. Would be earning that. It would be typically be the people who are working in chemists and so on and in hospitals, but it will include some highly paid professionals as well. Higher paid, I should say, not highly paid. The food safety, food preparation, they again probably inflated, I would have thought, for large numbers. A mean wage of 14,000 and a median wage of 15,000, and so on. Hairdressing, look at this: 10,000 is the mean wage, and 11,000 is the median wage. Childcare, 10 and 10, and then what I want you to sort of have a look at is this little thing at the bottom here. The most commonly used threshold of income poverty is the number of people below 60% of the median income. In that year, 26,900, whatever it was the median income. And virtually, I mean, all of these are subjects that I took out of that study, and are big subjects in the FE sector. Huge numbers of them are nowhere near 60% of the median household income. In other words, what we're training people for is income poverty in the vast majority of cases. So what should we do? We've been debating this in the WEA, and we thought we need to look out, and particularly I've been arguing, we need to look outside the kind of standards and professionalisation and individualisation process. A few years ago we failed in part an Ofsted inspection, and we were inspected for about 3 million years after that to see that we were coming up to standards. And when we got finally clear of them, we all went, oh, thank God for that. It's time to sort of look up, and you're kind of like blinking in the sunlight and thinking about things that you could do. So we started to think about, and I started to look, and partly under help from some research, thinking about how adults learn and why learning is necessarily social. I know this, but I've kind of forgotten it when I was trying to think about individual learning plans and so on, and the nature of why it's important that human beings are not just sat in front of a computer terminal reading computer information and learning things, although we can learn, of course, by doing some of that, but how we need to talk to each other and think about it and test ideas and think about understandings and be pointed out to us of different possibilities or of different ways of looking at it. And it seems to me that's something that we just all too easily forget when we're trying to get people through a particular approach. So the other thing that struck me, the WEA has always had an idea of teachers and students working as equals, but what we started to think about was how teachers and students were almost co-conspirators in the process of learning, that if we were working together, then we were much stronger than if I'm standing here rather like I am now, as the sage on the stage doing the sort of expert stuff, and this is precisely why I agree with your original points. So helping teachers and students act as equals and co-educators was something we needed to reinvigorate in our organisation. Trying to tackle issues courageously and honestly, and stop trying to pretend that they're not issues, and helping people develop. I've said understandings. Somebody pulled me up the other day and said, "Don't you mean understanding?" And I don't. I mean understandings, because I think that sometimes there are different ways to look at things, and we sometimes get locked into our own particular approach and ideas. Particularly if I've spent a lifetime around people who are quite political, and certainly they get locked into thinking theirs is the only possible way that you can think about this process. And what I thought we needed to have a look at was how we might develop understandings through research, better context setting, and activities in our classes. So a reality check. If we're going to do research, we sometimes kind of get ourselves into, again, thinking about it being independent and objective. We're doing some research in our classes. I've just done some research there. Is it truthful? Is it independent and objective? Or or is it subjective and partisan? And we know that it can be certainly the latter, don't we? We know from things like commercial interests and so on. And I suppose what I wanted to get into our people's heads as well is that education can be the same. It's dead tempting when you're a teacher to sort of think of yourself as the font of wisdom, and that you've got a kind of neutral and factual approach, and we're telling you real truthful things. But actually, we're just as positioned and error-prone as anybody else in this process. And again, it's that important point about teachers and students working as equals, encouraging that stuff to say, I think you're talking crap, actually, and we need to sort of have a discussion about how that sort of stuff works. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. Although we're educators, we have no right to be right about everything, and we're not. All researchers and educators, I think, come with backgrounds and positions, and it's often right to sort of explore those in the context of the class. I think this is interesting, this WEA approach. We're trying to get our students to work out the questions and answers for themselves, rather than requiring any expert mediation by tutors. We don't want us to say how it should be. We want them to think about it, and us collaboratively and collectively to think about it. And it's why we stress the co-learning rather than the individual expert-centred approach. We're trying to re-establish a critical pedagogy, an approach to teaching in our classes. So trying to make classrooms socially aware spaces, not simply social places. A lot of adult education people turn up for good reason, and we support it, for things like community and for a bit of company and to get out of the house and to do things like that. Great, we like that, but we don't just want it to be that. We want it to be that and also thinking about what's going on around them. We want to develop this notion of critical thinking, getting people to be more critical about the way they look at stuff, re-examining our knowledge as students and tutors, and trying to consciously determine what we wish to think, not just kind of acquiring the view of the most strident voice, even if that is the teacher. So trying to consciously getting people to think about that.